Hi guys, welcome back. Irritate UK here with a video response to Sean Connors, aka The Outsider 68, his DM interview. 11 questions. I will post them below in case anyone else wants to give him another video in response. 1. How did you get into role-playing? It originally started as a small kid because I've always been a fan of monster movies, monsters in general, horror movies, fantasy. But it really kind of kicked off when I was about 8. My mum bought me a book. I don't think she knew what it was, but it was called What is Dungeons and Dragons, and was written by 3 college kids in the States, I believe, to explain role-playing. And even at that age, I devoured this book. I still have it. In fact, I have 2 copies of it now. I still have it, and it really fired my imagination. But it would be a number of years yet before I actually got to do anything. A couple of years after reading that, we moved house, and in order to keep me busy and out of the way, my parents bought me 2 of the fighting fantasy books by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone. One was definitely Death Trap Dungeon. I think the other one was probably Warlock of Firetop Mountain, or possibly Island of the Lizard King. I can't quite remember. But again, this was a huge leap for me because I got to be this hero that I read about in this other book and go on these quests, fight monsters, collect treasure. But it would probably be about another 5 years before I actually got to play a role-playing game, and that was when a new kid came to my high school. We became friends. Turns out he was a role player, and we played initially Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and it would be a couple of years before I got to play D&D or anything else really like that. But from there, I had the leaping point to expand my role-playing, for which I will be always grateful to him for. Question 2, how long have you been running games? Well, that will be 25 years, because it started in 87, it's now 2012. It seems like an awful long time, but it doesn't feel like it. 3, what are your favourite systems to run? Call of Cthulhu is a must, is a definite on that list. Pathfinder for fantasy. I really like the Vampire the Masquerade, and to a lesser extent Vampire Requiem, and the Deathwatch game in the 40k game line are my favourites. I've got a host of other games that I like, but those are my top ones. Question 4, how would you describe your DMing style? Basic. I don't worry about having the exact rules. I'm quite happy to make things up as we go. I'm quite happy to run with what players come up with. I don't worry too much about how the system would cover something or what have you. I just like to run a straight game. There's no power gaming, there's no rules lawyering. It's just a case of, we're here to have fun, and fun is the important bit. What is your best quality as a DM? This is question 5. It's the ability to tell a story. This kind of goes hand in hand with the last question, because I don't like the mentality that seems to be going around these days, where I'm trying to think how to put it. There seems to be this mentality where you don't want to be railroaded, you don't want a structured campaign anymore. Everything seems to be sandbox. Have an area, have this, and let the players do what they want. I hate that. I really hate it. I loathe it with a passion. I like the, not railroaded, but I like the adventure path system. Wizards of the Coast did this with Paizo. You had the Shackled City, Age of Worms, Crimson Tide, I think was the 3rd one. That sort of thing. You have a campaign, it takes you from first through to wherever, and it flows. There's room for players to manoeuvre, so they don't have to just go from point A to point B to point C. And I like that particular sort of game, and I can run that sort of game. I like to tell a story, and any time I've run that sort of campaign, I've always had really good feedback from players, because to me when someone says that role playing is like being the author of your own book or your own director of your own film, I mean this from the player point of view as well as the DM, as the group. This is what I think it means, and you're doing that, and you're telling the story that you've been given, but you can adjust it so that you're telling the same story, but the players can go where they want, do what they want, side quests, whatever. And I think that's my quality, my best quality, that I can run that sort of game really, really well. Whereas whenever I've run a sandbox type game, it falls apart, because it just doesn't, for me it just doesn't work, and the players that I know, it just doesn't work either. Question 6. What makes a great DM? That's a really difficult question. A great DM can tell a story. This goes back to what I just said. A great DM can tell a story, whether that's an individual adventure, whether it's a larger part of a campaign or whatever. They can get the players in and focused. They can control the game. Something which I think sometimes I have trouble with, but I've had GMs where when things, let's call it timing, when you go along and suddenly things begin to slow down, they can pick up the pace again, and they keep everybody active and focused, and you're in the game. It's something I've never quite managed to get my head round to do, but I think that's the sign of it, to keep everybody occupied, keep them going. Also, I think a great DM doesn't rely on the rules. If needs be, they turn around and they go, right, we're not doing it this way, we're doing it this for this situation, we're doing it this for this campaign. Also, I think the other quality of a great DM is you can take what the players come up with and change your own module or your whatever you're running to accommodate it. Now, I've done this a few times. You've written out your plot, you think it's great, the players come along and suddenly they come up with ideas you hadn't even thought of, which are quite possibly better than what you've come up with. And to take that and on the fly change what you've done, and then when you get to that point and the players go, I knew it, you've got that spark from them because they think they've solved your puzzle, and they don't know that you've just taken their idea. They think they're on the ball. That is the sign of a great DM, I think. Pardon me. Question 7. Why do you DM? 2 reasons. One, I have a big imagination. I always have had ever since I was a kid, and that's my outlet. Because I can come up with this world, I can come up with this campaign, I can come up with this story, and I can let it out and I can flow and I can share it with others. As a player, I don't get quite the same pleasure. Partly it's a control thing. As a player, I never feel that I'm in control of my character, because the GM obviously can do what they want within reason. They may need, for the sake of the plot, to screw over your character to an extent, or all the things that we've done as GMs. In the time that we've been running. And I always kind of feel when that happens, I've lost control. And it's going to sound a bit odd, but I don't like it. But I much more prefer and enjoy to run the game, even if it means having to do the extra hours and the blood, sweat and tears in order to come up with a scenario or what have you. So for me, it's kind of partly a control thing for my own psyche, personality, whatever you call it. It's also an outlet for my imagination. Question 8. What would your players say about you? You'd have to ask them, really. But going from the feedback I get from them, I would say that I run a good game. Well, I think they would say that I run a good game, that I'm a fair and balanced GM. I don't know. You'd have to ask them, really, because I'm just thinking. This is one of those questions where I could project what I think they would say. But yes, I think they'd say that I was a fair GM. I run a good game. I tell a good story. I don't favour any one character, any one thing over the game. Question 9. What irritates you as a DM about yourself and the hobby? About myself... I don't know that there's anything that irritates me about me as a DM. Sometimes it's like... Perhaps sometimes it's a case of I don't always have the time to put into what I want to do for the game. And while I don't think the game suffers from it, I do wish that somehow I could make the time to put more effort into it. But then I think that's probably something that we all as GMs will find ourselves saying. As for the hobby, there's lots of things that irritate me about the gaming hobby, the gaming industry. The lack of public advertisement. Tabletop gaming, it doesn't matter whether it's role-playing games, board games, card games, the whole smorgasbord of the hobby gaming industry is being overrun by online gaming. I mean, technology is moving along, society is moving along, fair enough, but I think that tabletop gaming still has a lot to give. And the problem is that where once upon a time you'd be picking up new players from like high school or college or university, now rather than sit down to play D&D, you sit down to play World of Warcraft. And so there's less new blood coming into the hobby. Well, I think that people like Wizards of the Coast and some of the other big names, Chaosium or White Wolf, but definitely Wizards of the Coast with their D&D brand, need to start putting some advertising out there. You know, I remember picking up Marvel comics years ago and they'd have an ad for Dungeons and Dragons. I remember the old D&D cartoon, the D&D ad from like the early 80s, which you can find on YouTube. Look for it. But you don't see anything else. It's almost like these people advertise to the market they've already got. I remember when you pick up Dungeon or Dragon magazine back when they existed, you'd get ads for D&D products. It's like, yes, because, you know, we need to know what's coming up, but you're preaching to the converted, you know. Let's start seeing ads for D&D or whatever in the Sunday supplements. Let's see a new wave of television ads for D&D, especially now that the 5th edition or the next iteration is on the horizon. Let's start seeing something to push the hobby gaming industry back into the spotlight. That's what irritates me about the hobby. There isn't enough being done to bring in new bodies, new blood. There isn't enough to get the game back out, or the games back out into the public eye, into the consciousness, and let's try and get new people into the game. It just doesn't seem like anyone's bothering anymore. Question 10. What makes a great player? A great player is able to play along with the story. They turn up to tell the story that the GM has prepared. They don't power game. They don't rules lawyer. There's querying. You know, you sure about this, or can I get an extra bonus because of this? But to flat out just turn around and go, and I've had this before, have a player turn and go, the rules say this, so it's this. Don't, you know, great players don't do that. They turn up, they make a nice character, they don't overpower it, they don't try and dictate the game, they don't try and force the GM to run the game they want to play in. If you don't want to play in the game that the GM's running, don't play it. A great player turns up and plays the game being told. I mean, again, you've got to like the game system or what have you, and they get on with it, and they help tell the story, and they make the game heroic, and they make it memorable. That's the important thing, I think. And lastly, what piece of advice would you give to any DM? Oh dear. There'd be two things. One, check out the RPG brigade here on YouTube, because I may not agree with everybody's point of view or what have you, but there's a lot of awesome and really good advice on these channels for how to run games and how to prepare for them. But my own personal piece of advice would be enjoy the game. Don't if running the game is a chore, if you turn up every week and you go, you're not enjoying it, and back away. Either take some time off and do something else, non-game related, or become a player for a while, actually get a chance to see it from the other side. Try and rebuild the interest. But I've been there, and you can burn out. Thankfully, it's only ever happened to me twice in the 25 years that I've been running games. But you can burn out, and you need to take some time away. Don't just force yourself into it because you've got a group and you've got players and they want to play. You need to make sure that you don't burn yourself out. Anyway, that's been my video response to Sean Connor's DM interview. Until next time, take care and good gaming.